Good afternoon. Thank you, Mansi. I know we've all dealt with at some point in time to save the best for the last. And what you see in this slide is while it may look very challenging, the best business opportunity yet for digital banks to be more relevant for their customers. The UPI payment volumes in India was about 30 million transactions 5 years ago. And it has grown over 200 times to what it is today. I believe this month it is more than 7 billion. Right? Some of our large Finacle customers are reporting transactions of about 100 million per day. So to deal with these forces of disruption, some banks or many banks have gone about doing it in a little bit tactical way. And they've chosen to enhance certain points of digital interaction to deal with this whole technology disruption. Whereas the more matured ones have gone with a holistic digital transformation, and they are already in the lead in making this happen. Now, the digitally focused challenger banks and the new age banks have truly gotten this right by either infusing cloud at the outset or building components that are very digitally ready in nature. Right? And these volumes are there to grow. There are three reasons for these volumes to grow. One, the e-commerce transactions after pandemic is growing at around 20 to 25% per year. And this is partly because the trade is picking up, partly because there's a customer shift or a customer preference shift from a traditional walk into the store to an e-commerce transaction. Now, this directly increases the demand for electronic payments. So that's like item number one. Item number two, we see a lot of trade happening and banking happening within the trade. And that's a great opportunity for banks, right? So the point of sale, banks get substantial opportunities to provide credit products, either in terms of consumer loans or things like BNPL in partnership with the traders and the manufacturers and so on. And of course, the cash is being the least preferred method of transaction. So these three things are substantially increasing the digital transaction footprint, and it is here to continue to stay. The progressive banks who have gotten this right are really dealing with this very well and reporting cost-income ratios of less than 50%. And we heard an example of about 28% yesterday, right? And that's how they're dealing with it. And that's given them an unfair advantage in terms of to price better and to be able to make the best out of this. Now, to deal with this disruption, apart from building digital capabilities, your core needs to have these 9 key virtues. Now, it is one thing to manage these digital transactions very well. It is a whole different ballgame to make sure that your existing application systems and processes support what is needed to manage these growing volumes, as well as the agile innovation demands of the ecosystem. Now, to summarize this, there are 3 aspects to this. One, of course, is about leveraging the best of what cloud has to offer. Right? So the cloud ecosystem, the hyperscalers have really done a lot of innovation in driving elastic scale, high level of uptime, robustness, etc., the security robustness, etc. Right? So that's one part, to really leverage all of that stuff and make sure that you leverage the best out of it and manage your transaction processing very well. The second part of it, which is probably more important, or equally important, is about architecting the application to manage planet scale. Right? Now, it's probably it's making sure that you adopt the right principles of, say, stateless architecture and eventual consistency and so on and so forth to make sure that it really scales at planet level. Because today we see transactions at 100 million per day, And it is projected to be close to 1 billion transactions per day in some 3 to 4 years' time, right? I don't know where we'll be. Maybe we will exceed the target very soon, or maybe we may not reach it, but that's the kind of scale predictions that we are talking about. So the application architecture is, it'll play a very, very critical role on that. And the second aspect, which, Sanat mentioned his keynote yesterday, it's about componentizing these application components so that they independently scale. And you can manage these rapid innovations through assembling various components together, as well as provides you a upgrade path and an innovation path and so on and so forth, right? So these are independently operating components with a role of their own, coming together to compose a customer solution for your customers, right? So that's the other key aspect of this. What is also important to make sure is there are not too many components where managing those components coexisting with each other becomes the biggest problem, or there aren't too less components where you're not getting the scale and agility and so on, right? Now, last but not the least, the ecosystem play, right? How does the core enable you to extend to the ecosystem where your customers can embed banking within the trade? And they can do this by themselves, right? So it's, in some form, it is kind of like looking at developer as a customer there, right? So enabling them to extend very freely, leveraging data to be able to make the right decisions. We saw in our innovation center in Singapore, in DBS, some great stories of how data has been leveraged to be more relevant for the customer. And of course, last but not the least, driving substantial amount of automation to bring our costs and predictability under control. With this, I request Abhijit, the Chief Technology and Digital Officer of HDFC Limited, to share his thoughts around digital transformation.
Thank you so much. Well, thank you very much, Sajit, for this opportunity. And yeah, so for many of you from India, you know what HDFC Limited is. For others, we are one of the largest housing finance companies in the country, and maybe in the world as well. We don't know that, at the volumes that we process, it's quite a large volume that we do. Some of our deposits that we have would be bigger than some of the private sector banks that are there in the country. So, and customers, also we would be one of the largest, even when we compare to banks. Yeah. Now, when we undertook this whole digital transformation journey, we were looking at why are companies doing digital? Yeah, and because digital is, everybody talks digital, but why do you do it? And we found that roughly 40% of the people try to do it to increase operational excellence. Yeah. And these are survey results, so giving an idea where things are. About 36% look at a faster time to market, and about the remaining 35 increase their ability to meet customer expectations. Yeah? So these were broadly what we could see what was happening around us. Yeah? In India, typically the digital adoption is actually increasing at 47% year on year. So with 1 billion people, it's almost pervasive, almost everywhere that digital is there. Now, on top of that, when you overlay housing as a product, it is very different in every city, every state. There are different regulations, there are different dynamics that come on top of it. Yeah? And therefore, the level of personalization in this product is very, very high. What we're also seeing is that, about 23.1% or 23% is the projected growth rate of digital banking. That's the annualized growth rate. So the pace at which things are coming to us is huge, and especially as technology professionals, the kind of volume, the kind of things which are coming up are quite a lot. Yeah? But on the flip side, about 99% of companies, that means, it's only 1% remaining who haven't done a digital transformation. Everybody has started doing a digital transformation. Yeah. And only 34% have reached the maturity in digital transformation, which also says, that there are some lessons to be learned in execution, and how do you execute digital to the core. Yeah. And lastly, in India, the payments actually has come up like anything. We can do payments on mobile number. And if you look at, the numbers is staggering. When I was in the bank and we started doing UPI transactions, we never thought it will go to such a level. And it's become, about 46 billion transactions, and doesn't stop. Yeah. With all of this as a backdrop, what we looked at is what should be our priorities as a company. Yeah? And we realized it was, one was, about looking at how can we use digital transformation and basically the power of automation that can come in. But life is not easy for us because, at the same time, the housing market boom is happening and the kind of volumes that we are seeing are huge. So you are basically changing the engine of the aeroplane while it is flying, and balancing the two is a very tough task. So what are we doing? So we are looking at twin stack, where we are, this is more on the technology side, but mostly looking at modelized architecture, twin stacks, where there is a legacy system which is running with new age interaction, which is happening. But on the other side, what we have done is, the execution model is, it's very distributed execution model. So COVID taught us that people can work from wherever they are. Yeah. And purposely, in the whole transformation, we mostly banks typically do is have a centralized transformation team which is sitting at one place. What we have done is that our transformation team is spread all over the country, so it is not at one place. And at each of those local areas, we are constantly getting feedback. And almost every week, we launch something new, some small new feature here and there, which is actually useful for the consumer as he moves on. Yeah? So that's also helping us completely reimagine customer journeys. And given the housing regulations, the land rules, etc., that are there, in every state there is some kind of a new thing that comes in. Yeah. We're also trying to build, completely future-ready capabilities. So not only that external customer is a customer, but even for employees as well, we are looking at, how can we make their lives easy. The other piece that has happened is, we had a lot of analytics. So for example, within our company, we can actually predict, because so many applications are coming. For each company, we can actually predict what's the kind of salary they get at various levels. So there are a lot of automated processing that we can do. So these are some of the capabilities that we are now really exposing at scale, so that we can actually give home loan offers very quickly. So our new digital journey, which has gone live and which we are trying out in various home fairs, can do a home loan approval within 5 minutes if everything is filled in. And this is for a property. So you walk into a property and say, I want to buy this property, and you get a home loan absolutely within minutes. However, we don't know whether the customer really wants it, but the beautiful part of it is that it has helped streamline our internal processes completely. Yeah. The third piece that we are looking at is, slowly we have actually opened up how we are performing to the customer, and good or bad. So we started this whole transformation program, and there was a very beautiful ad campaign during the time we were growing up, which was called Daag Achhe Hain. So in the initial phases, we opened up, and we got a lot of feedback, good, bad, ugly, and we said, let's not stop any feedback, because if a customer is taking all the effort to complain to you, there must be something in it. And every customer complaint we dealt with, trying to take what is the insight that the customer is telling us, actually sending technologists, as I think Brian said very aptly, sending technologists to the forefront. And that's why, at the branches, don't sit in the head office, but go to the branch, talk to the customer, understand what is he telling you, and incorporate it into the product, as we are moving forward. The other piece was, looking at lean as one of the ways of processing, looking at what are the wasteful activities, how can we increase the efficiency of a credit analyst and things like that. So that has really helped us as we are moving forward. The last two pieces are, around delivering a strong operating performance. So we have kept our goals completely business aligned. So it's not about having a new technology product, but it's about, how can TAT reduce. One of the goals that I have is how do you increase business by 33% in this year. And there is a certain book size that has to be achieved, and I don't have any other objective. So the only objective is the book size has to grow at this level, the NPA has to be at this level. So our objectives are absolutely business aligned. There's no technology objective that I carry. So lastly, coming to what are our priorities for the next year, it is, some of it I covered, is driving business value, but big thing is around adoption. So one of the things is, all of us technologists make a shiny new product, but adoption is where most of us lack. So here we have actually, because of our distributed model, each person in every branch is a digital champion for us, and his job is actually to ensure that if there's an opportunity of 100 people using a particular application, how many people are actually using it? And take the feedback loop, because whatever you make as you start off may not be the best. And that's how we are working on that whole adoption journey. The other piece is, we've started to use AI, and not really, AI and at its true peak, but even weak AI, which is helping us. Smaller tasks, small tasks that can be automated, that actually take the burden out of our front line and help us service our customers. And our strategy, from a tech perspective is always cloud first, think mobile first, and nothing else as we move forward. So what we are trying to do is, gearing up for 10x of present volumes. And this is more from, how can the same amount of employees service 10 times the volume? And therefore, it brings a lean thinking into the whole approach. And, we're looking at how processes can be changed easily. Looking at personalization at each level. So for us, when anybody's applying for a home loan, our complete whole process is digital, and we know at which stage he has dropped. And with data and other things, we're trying to see, is there something that we are doing wrong, or is there a nudge that this person needs? What's his behavior? What time does he like to be called? What time does he like to be sent an email to? So all those kinds of deep personalization we are trying to do. The other pieces, are more around, flashy things like metaverse and all. We think that, in the housing space, 3D as well as metaverse can play a role. What we've found in our research is that an average person looks at 7 to 10 houses before he narrows down onto a house. And we're looking at, can metaverse be used to reduce that number of houses he's looking from, let's say, 7 to 8 to about 2 to 3 that he looks at and actually gets a house. And how do we embed ourselves in this whole journey when he's trying to find a house? So we have two journeys that exist. So one is he's come to our site and he wants to take a home loan. The second journey we're trying to do is you are trying to find a house, and then you are coming to a financial journey. So both these things we are trying to do, and let's see, how we move forward. But the initial results have been very encouraging. Thank you so much, and I would like to invite Avinash to come and talk about his journey at Axis Bank. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, and very good afternoon to all. Pardon the sore throat. I mean, the jumping, jiving, and shouting that we did yesterday. I mean, we bankers are not used to that, but wonderful evening. So, just taking over from where Abhijit and Sajit sort of left us, right? Let's take a step back in terms of, what are the contours of the entire push towards the digital revolution that we have on us. Enough said about the pandemic. I'll not sort of talk about the same. But at least in context of India, I don't think we give enough credit to the policymakers in terms of, the changes which they have sort of brought about over the last few years. I mean, the entire interventions towards Aadhaar, right? I mean, it started way back in 2009, potentially around 2013, 14, the entire country was given a digital identity. And from there, we have sort of taken off in a mind-boggling way. You take the case of Aadhaar, you take the case which sort of enabled the entire stuff around, digital KYC. You talk about the innovations which have essentially happened around UPI. You take the innovations which are now happening in a lot of the segments around account aggregator, open credit, stuff like that, right? I mean, these are railroads which the policy makers in India have sort of put together. So, would not be fair to say that, okay, I mean, banks alone have been innovating over here, the fintechs or, the partner ecosystem has been innovating over here. I think the policy making has also sort of kept pace. Okay, so this is one very important point which I think we tend to understate and underestimate in a lot of places. The other thing is, of course, we need to be looking in terms of, what is essentially happening around us. I mean, there is a massive fintech boom. We are no longer, as banks, we don't only compete with other banks, big, small. We don't only compete with the NBFCs. I mean, the consumer out there is basically expecting a very similar level of efficiency, a very similar level of experience as they see when they interact with a neobank, as they see when they interact with an e-commerce company. In a way, I mean, if I speak to some of the youngsters who are sort of joining us now, I mean, the experience that they are looking at is that of an Instagram or a Twitter. I mean, of course, Elon Musk may have some views about Twitter, but nevertheless, I mean, the youngsters who are sort of joining us are basically looking at banking applications, Even the back office applications in terms of how we do work and sort of challenging those notions in terms of how are we currently structured. And of course, given the entire marketplace disruption which is being brought about by the big techs, the fintechs, the focus is more in terms of hyper personalization. Okay, I mean when we conceive products at one point of time, I mean the idea here was that okay, I mean we get it right and then we go out, take it to the masses. Axis Bank, incidentally, for those of you who may not be aware, I mean we are a full-scale bank. We are the third largest private sector bank in the country. So we offer products which range from large, mid-corporate, SME, retail segment to all of them. And the initial thought process till very recently was around the fact that okay, you come out with the product and this is what we have. We won't change the same. You may, as a customer, have certain requirements which could be little different. What we are now trying to do here is we are essentially trying to see whether we can actually talk to the segment of one. Talk and see whether we can actually personalize the offerings to the need of the customer so that we are present whenever their financial requirements essentially sort of comes up. So this is just to give folks an idea about the entire digital penetration which is there in India per se. I won't spend too much time on this. I mean, this is just to get a sense of things. And this is basically a bit of a scorecard as far as Axis Bank is concerned. The way to look at it, and there are a lot of numbers over here, but the way to look at it is if we look at the traditional segment, right? I mean, Axis has been there for the last close to 30 years. And in the traditional segment, which is assets, deposits, advances, roughly we occupy about 5% of the overall space in the country. Compare that with the digital segment. Okay. In the digital segment, if you look at the UPI space, Axis accounts for 16%. If you look at mobility, the mobile transactions, we account for 15%. If you look at cards, we are somewhere close to 12 odd. So effectively, the moment we have actually embraced the entire vision towards digital, we have managed to punch little above our weight. And all of this that we are trying to do is aligned to the strategy of the bank. I mean, there is no point in essentially coming up with a digital strategy which is completely not resonating along with the overall bank strategy per se. So at the bank, we have three vectors. We chase growth, we chase profitability, and we chase sustainability. All the three of them have got different metrics that we track very, very closely. All of us in the bank are actually, from a KPI perspective, sort of rank stack ourselves against these KPIs. And broadly, if I were to look at it, I mean, what we are trying to do over here, right? I mean, we are essentially trying to go in for a performance culture. End of the day, I mean, you can have the finest technology. End of the day, you could have the finest products. But as long as the organization does not respond as one, as long as the organization does not culturally adapt to the changes which is essentially happening, it can be very difficult to get the results that we are looking for. We are trying to improve upon our core capabilities, be it on the product side, be it on the technology side, be it in terms of soft skills. These are all areas where we are essentially trying to do a lot of stuff. And obviously, I mean, it's a given. I'm sure everybody here sort of works in the similar direction. We are all trying to build for the future. And at Axis, what we are also trying to do is, as an experiment, we are trying to see whether we can actually have a Axis 2.0, which is a bank within a bank, which is completely digital. So the idea is take the traditional products, okay, turn the idea completely upside down, see whether you are actually able to completely reimagine those journeys, and let's see where it goes. Now, how do we do this? And maybe this is where the technologist in me sort of comes through. How do we do this? So obviously, at the center stage here is what is the kind of an architecture that we need to have. Typically, architecture as a function in the past was not thought of to be as important as what it is today. There are products, there are quick wins out there, which we have started saying no to, purely because it does not sort of resonate with the cloud first, containerized, microservices kind of a journeys that we want to build. There's a lot of focus in terms of data. We have spoken about data, over the last two days. But the idea here is not only to sort of analyze, mint the data which is residing within the bank, but also to sort of work with partner ecosystems and essentially see in terms of, what is the greater depth of data that we can sort of, learn about our customers from there. And one great example on this is, some of the partnerships that we have essentially done with a few e-com firms like Flipkart and others. Today, there is a significant percentage of our new card acquisition essentially happens through some of our partnerships that we have done. We want to transition to an omni-channel experience, easier said than done. It's still some way away. But from a mobility standpoint, the bank has got an app which is rated 4.8 in the Play Stores, Android Play Stores. It's amongst the highest ratings out there. And a lot of it is essentially possible purely because of the focus that we have done in terms of the internal service mesh, the internal APIs that we have gone ahead and constructed. Focus on infrastructure. The system of records still reside on-premise. There is huge amount of discussions, a lot of midnight oil being burnt in terms of the fact that, okay, how do we take it to the cloud? How do we first make it cloud ready? For banks like us, the kind of volumes that we essentially have may mean that, okay, there is a huge amount of refactoring which would be required if we have to take it to the cloud. So a lot of discussions being done along with Sajit and his team over here for that. I think everybody has sort of embraced agile. Everybody has embraced DevOps, but the success in terms of going agile across the organization. We are 88,000 strong as an organization. Easier said than done. There are certain units, especially on the retail space, which are a lot more amenable to the concept of agility, to the concept of having a pod where people sort of come together, co-create. There are certain businesses which are a lot more difficult to crack, but we are essentially trying to sort of work with them in terms of, getting the necessary outcomes. And last but not the least, there is huge amount of focus in terms of resiliency. There is huge amount of focus in terms of cyber. The expectation from the regulators in terms of, the fiduciary responsibility that a bank carries to a customer is something which cannot be, it's huge. So effectively, uptime, factor on data protection, how do we stay resilient from cyber attacks, how do we respond to a particular crisis. Now, these are all elements which is extremely important as we go digital to the core. Putting stuff out there is probably one part of the journey. There is a huge amount of work which needs to be done around risk governance as well. I spoke about a lot of this, so I'll just maybe just focus in terms of the first block that you see over here. We have to invest in the right talent. The skills which were relevant about 10 years ago is probably quite passé today. Some of us at Axis, tend to joke around the fact that about 10, 15 years back, essentially if you knew, say, Oracle database or maybe SQL, there was a job for you out there as a database administrator. Today, if you think about it, there are hundreds of database options, right? Hundreds of them. And it's extremely important to basically pick up the right kind of talent. Otherwise, you could be stuck in terms of, some of the legacy stuff that we are sort of carrying with us. So not only does it mean in terms of imbibing talent, it also means that, okay, we need to be investing in terms of reskilling our workforce, big way. And this is, in a way, the iterative process, which I see going on for the next couple of years. We will have to keep reimagining the customer journeys. We will, at the back end, under the hood, once we have done, there is obviously a lot of focus in terms of business, product, etc., in terms of the customer offerings. But there is equal amount of significant work which needs to happen under the hood as well, right? I mean, your infrastructure needs to be modernized. Your network layers would need to be modernized. The way we are currently monitoring stuff would need to be monetized. So these are all regular iterations which continue to happen. We will be looking in terms of partnerships. I think the way forward is to offer financial services where the customer is. So if the customer is happy going to an e-commerce site, if the customer is happy going to buy movie tickets, or if the customer is basically planning a vacation, I mean, the idea is that instead of the customer going over there and then figuring out the kind of needs that he or she may have, it is important that, okay, we be present where the customer is essentially going. And of course, underpinning all of that is the big data and the data stack. And how do we, over a period of time, as we move forward towards building an Access 2.0, which is completely digital, slowly hollowing out the old products, old processes, and essentially sort of coming up with a brand new bank in itself. Thank you.
Before we open the audience for questions, I have a couple of questions to both of you. Abhijit, how do you foresee a cloud-first strategy benefiting the bank to drive growth and customer value?
So I think, there are a couple of reasons, why we look at cloud. So one is, traditionally what has happened is IT people have been spending a lot of energy keeping systems up and running in their own data centers. Now today, what is the role of the technologist in a financial services company is to help in the transformation. And if bulk of your time, 80–90% of time you spend in keeping the lights on, where does the IT person spend time, in actually developing new products, talking to customers, understanding what it is? So the way cloud has come up today with multiple options, it's actually wonderful for a technologist to actually let all this lights on business be managed by these providers. And you can actually create the kind of components or the kind of things that you need. And yesterday, I think I was at that Gartner, the Forrester person, and what we also feel, in the housing market itself or in financial services, there are going to be small components that we are going to use. So be it, the account aggregator model in India, or be it the credit bureau, there are so many things that you need to call. And having all of this in cloud makes it so easy. So just to give you an example, when we have to launch something new, or change a particular journey. Nowadays, it does not take more than 3 to 4 days with all the good bureaucracy that we want to put in. And compared to previously in my career, this same thing could have taken between 3 months to 6 months, depending on how hard we pushed. So there's a massive benefit that we are getting of the cloud.
Lovely. Yep. Avinash, you mentioned about critical partnerships to expand the ecosystem, right? Which are the top 3 areas that you would be considering in this direction in terms of building partnership ecosystems to further your digital strategy?
So the way to look at it is, there is a business partnership, obviously, which I just spoke about, right? I mean, we are trying to partner. In fact, we are open to partnership in virtually all areas, right? I mean, the more visible one of them are the kind of partnerships that we obviously do with, say, Flipkarts or Amazon or Airtel for that matter, right? But we also end up partnering with fleet trucks for the purpose of toll gates. So from a partnership perspective, I think we are absolutely open. The view here is that, okay, we got to be where the customer is. Internally, we are obviously partnering, with folks like yourself for the last so many years. This particular thing has now expanded over the last 3–4 years to include a bunch of cloud service providers. Access, incidentally, amongst the banks was the first one to sign up with both AWS as well as Azure when they landed. We follow a hybrid cloud strategy. We have landing zones in all the 3 places. Some of it is not by design, some of it is also purely, the business compulsions. But the point is that it is a lot more integrated today than what it used to be. Okay, I mean, we will have to work with businesses. We will have to work with partners in order to sort of reach out to the customers far more effectively. And it could be, I like using this phrase, it could be, at the top or under the hood. Both the places, partnership is absolutely important.
Thank you. Any questions from audience?
Hi. You talked about KPIs. Can you give me a couple of examples of sustainability KPIs and the growth KPIs? You said the KPIs are aligned across the organization.
Is that to
Axis Bank? Sorry.
Yeah. So it's like this. At the top, I mean, we obviously will have KPIs around business growth. We have KPIs around compliance. We have KPIs around the entire human resource aspects. And what we try to do over here is, I mean, at the top level, there is going to be the macro KPIs. And depending on the segment in which you have been working on, I mean, this particular KPI sort of keeps coming down. So straight examples around it. I mean, we want to do a project around Bharat Bank, or we want to do a project around modernizing the entire corporate banking space that we have. The teams who are working in the pods, both on the product side, technology side, ops, and for that matter, even folks from risk and compliance, right? I mean, they are going to be sharing a very similar kind of a business target. The targets, and I think this is something which is now fairly commonly used. The targets have got nothing to do with the choice of technology, etc. The target will simply be around the fact that, okay, I mean, these are the business numbers. Have you sort of, achieved those particular numbers? Have you, depending on the role that you play in that particular pod, have you actually sort of, worked towards them? From a sustainability piece, the idea here is that, okay, I mean, how do we sort of reduce the footprint in terms of stuff that we have been doing in the past? And right now, I can say that, okay, at Axis, we probably have some work to do in that particular direction. It's in the Indian ecosystem, potentially this as a conversation has come up fairly recently. Last couple of years, I mean, this becomes a factor. But focus is on that particular subject. And that is how it sort of, trickles down. I mean, I'm not very sure whether I've answered your question fully.
Abhijit, in your previous role, you successfully led and pioneered the entire adoption of a blockchain-led trade consortium for the country like India. Are you planning to use a similar DLT-based approach to transform the way the mortgage or the housing loan business that is taking place in India by digitizing the land records and then making sure there's a lot of transparency, automation, and then safety and security?
Oh, that's a very loaded question. Okay. No, I think certainly what we are looking at is ultimately using DLT in processing. Land records, not yet, it's mostly in the government area where we are trying to see is there something that can be done. But you will be surprised to note that in a lot of places, actually, the housing records have been digitized. So in many states, actually, the full registration process that we do is completely digital. So even without blockchain being there, it's a digital process and slowly it's moving on. And similarly, e-stamping is also available now in a lot of states. So that's really helped us, when we are trying to launch our new journeys where, and basically it's a need of the country, with affordable housing coming up, the speed at which, organizations will have to approve loans has to be much, much faster than what it is today. Otherwise, all these houses will not be able to be funded. So we're certainly looking at that stage and looking at innovative technologies, but processing mortgages on blockchain platform is certainly on our radar.
We have time for just one more question.
Yeah, one question I think I should say to both of you. What is your strategy of your bank to have the banking as a service? Something similar to like trade as a service or such kind of thing.
Yeah, you're referring to other people able to consume their services to extend banking forward, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
So we are actually doing that to some extent. We do work with neobanks. We do have a developer platform out there, where there are a bunch of services which is absolutely available for people to come explore and start using them. I think in the Indian context, there is a bit of a vibrant, fintech ecosystem which is actually exploring that fairly extensively, rapidly. We have to see it scale. That hasn't happened yet. But in terms of the ability out there for others to sort of work with us in terms of the services that we have, most of it is now available.
Yeah. So for us, I think in a way it already exists. So in our loan book, roughly 50% of the loans we source ourselves. The rest 50% actually we work with various partners, various banks. And actually they just send the customer to us and immediately we can tell, whether we can proceed or we cannot proceed. Similarly, any customer can come, or even this is available with a lot of builders as well, where it is embedded into their journeys and a person sitting in a builder's office. Because housing is very physical, it's not a over-the-counter kind of a product. So sitting at a builder's premises also, one can actually understand the eligibility and actually take a home loan. So there are some steps we have taken in that stage, but in parts, the service actually exists already today, and in future, it will be completely a drop of a hat. You should be able to do that.
Thank you, Abhijit.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you.